All right, guys, welcome back to Let the Journey Begin. I'm your host, Jason Waller, alongside my co-host, Alex Meschi. We are joined here by the great Diana. She is actually the Director of Operations for Catalyst Recovery. Diana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We appreciate it. Hit it, Alex.
Yeah. No, Diana, it was great to meet you. We ran into you rather at our event out in Vegas. I know Jason's interacted with you since you're a part of Catalyst Recovery, but it was nice meeting you and talking bits of recovery and how we can improve the foundation. You gave some great tidbits that we're definitely running with, so thank you for those. Good. We're happy to have you here. For our audience, Diana is somebody that I spoke with, I would say a pretty good, decent amount, from recovery to what's happening in the world, mental health, stock market. She's a very well-rounded person to speak to and definitely caught my interest. So I'm happy to have you here and excited to pick your brain further.
Okay, perfect.
So Diana, with Alex saying all that stuff, again, and knowing you, incredible woman, accomplished a lot, but I know that you also had your struggles, and it always wasn't like that. I kind of wanted to go back and see what your childhood was like. Get a little overview of your childhood, and then your first interactions into drug abuse.
When I was growing up, we had a deck in my backyard, and my parents didn't finish the railing. I would take my bike up the stairs and go as far away from the edge as I could, and then get as much speed as I could to launch myself off the railing, like off the ledge, right? Because the feeling that I felt when I was like suspended in the air was like my body felt electric, my mind felt quiet, and my heart felt like lifted, right? And I think like I just chased that feeling for the rest of my life.
Wow. How old were you when that happened?
That was when I was like a tiny kid. Like I was like a young kid, I was 5-6 years old. That was like my fun. But I think like that feeling is what I chased going forward. And my story is a little different. I actually, I got into hard substances from a teacher at my school, and it made the news. It was a whole thing.
Whoa. I'm sorry. I didn't know that. Let's go back a minute. Okay. So
yeah.
First of all, phenomenal, overview and explanation. I love that, especially tying back all the way to when you were a kid, number one. But number two is, so you talk to me about that. So you got introduced to hard drugs from a teacher. How old were you and what happened?
So I was about 15. And our math teacher at my school was, I guess, doing drugs and sleeping with some kids at the school. And it was a thing, but one of my friends was actually, engaging in some of that behavior with her. And she said, why don't you come hang out at her house? She'll give us hall passes so we can skip school and hang out at the teacher's house. And so I did, and, she let us drink, and then, that went on for a little while. We were just like kind of drinking and, smoking weed with the teacher. And it was, it was kind of cool because we got extra privileges and our grades were great.
Wait, so is this a female or a male teacher?
It's a female teacher.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a female teacher. And eventually at some point, I don't really know exactly how, but at some point she introduced heroin to us, and she was saying that it would help us sober up before we went home because we were getting drunk in the middle of the day. And she was like, oh, this will help you guys sober up. I'm just going to, inject you with this and you guys can be on your way. Yeah. So it, we ended up catching habits and like having like experiencing withdrawal symptoms. And eventually someone's parents found out something happened, but she started having, the police surveillance her house. And I guess, they went into her dumpsters and they, pulled like syringes out, and it was like a whole thing. But I remember I had to go to like grand jury and all this court stuff. And she went to jail. I think she got sentenced like 45 years and served like 9 or 10. And we were listed as victims. And so they did not share our names because there was 4 of us that she had kind of gotten into drugs. And because of that, the media was at the school like every day, like looking, trying to figure out like, who we were, like hear our story and kind of that kind of stuff. So they kind of just let us like go home and just kind of gave us degrees. They're like, okay, we want to wash this, hide this under the rug kind of thing.
Real quick, was there any prior substance abuse, like substance use, not even abuse, did she literally introduce you to your first drink, first drug?
No. So I had drank at that time. I had smoked weed. Probably that's it, I think.
Okay. How old were you? So that was when you were like 15, you said though, right? With the teacher?
Yeah.
Then so your first use was probably like what, 13?
Yeah, 12, 13, I think.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
What was the timeline from the first time you interacted with this teacher to the whole sentencing and everything?
Oh, it was about a year. So it was, well, the sentencing happened after, but like until like they came in with like, the whole squad came in, broke into our house. Like, we were like running out the back door. People were like hiding on the roof. Like it was a whole thing. And yeah, it like,
this is like a movie.
Yeah. Well, they made a Law and Order like a episode like loosely based on the story. Yeah, it was like it was a thing. It was a big thing.
Wow. So how were you guys using like once a week at her house, like every day? Like tell me a little bit more about that.
So it was an everyday thing. Like right out of the gate, it was like we went, we were drinking. That was fun. And we didn't have to go to school. She was giving us the passage. She would pick us up and then bring us from the school to her house. And we kind of started doing it pretty much every day, I would say. And then at a certain point, she says, you guys have to start bringing me money from your parents. This isn't free. And we're like, what isn't free? Like, what do you mean? She's like, this isn't free. You need to have like money for this. We didn't have any money because we were just like kids. Yeah. And we were like, we're not going to bring this lady money. Like, what is she talking about? So we were like, we're just going to not come by anymore. And I remember she said, you guys are going to get really sick and you'll be back. And me and my one friend who had just gotten her license, actually, we like drove off. We were like, we're not going back. That lady's weird. Like, why is she like 45 and wanting to hang out with us and like telling us we're going to buy drugs? Like, what is going on? Mm-hmm. So we were like, we're not going back. And I remember like one day goes by, we didn't feel great. The next day we were sitting, and I like specifically remember like where we were sitting when we were not feeling great and had this conversation, like maybe we just go back and see if we do it, what that feels like if it will make us not feel so bad. Because we were starting to feel the withdrawal symptoms, but we weren't really quite sure what withdrawal symptoms were. This is like, I'm like a lot older. So this is well before the whole like oxy stuff. And like it was not a talked about thing.
Right. And
so like we just didn't know. And so we like made the decision. We're like, okay, we'll go back like one time and do it and see what happens. And then like we'll stop, and we went back feeling sick and did it. Because all the other times we didn't feel sick. We just did it because we were doing it and we'd feel okay. We'd only do a little. But when we were feeling sick and then did it, it was like, whoa.
So this was going on for obviously. I mean, so would it be fair to say you guys were using at her house for a 9-month period, or was it that full year?
No, probably like a year, probably about a year.
Okay. So a year long, you guys are doing it almost every day, you're saying, right? And then it gets to that point. So you guys started dabbling into heroin, and so you were doing it frequent enough to where you're obviously getting withdrawal symptoms. So that's something that you guys were experiencing.
Well, I would say we were doing it every day for about 3 months before she started asking for money. And that's when we got sick. It was much sooner than the year. But after that, so that was only maybe a few months and we actually experienced withdrawal symptoms. So we were actually physically hooked. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so you guys are feeling sick and, you had this idea or thought in your head, why is this lady wanting to hang out with us? This is kind of weird. We shouldn't go back. Then you're feeling sick. All right, maybe we should go back. Maybe we need what she has, this, that. What happened from there? What transpired as from more like the mental health perspective? Obviously, you guys are having withdrawal things, but it sounds to me like you guys had the wherewithal to know that this lady isn't good news, isn't somebody you should be around, but now you're getting sucked into it because of the withdrawals. Where did it go from there?
I think where it went from there is we obviously went back and we were like, all right, let's keep doing this, but not as much. And then we were like, let's find our own, suppliers instead of giving it through her, and it turned into addiction. But the reason why when I started this, I was really careful to say she was the person to introduce me to hard drugs. And the reason why I tell the story about why I like to ride my bike off the edge of the deck was because it wasn't that made me suffer longer as an addict than the average person. There was 4 of us who got, wrapped up in it. And 3 of them, once the police came and everyone, saw what was going on, 3 of them stopped. I was the only one who didn't. You know what I mean? I struggled for 13 years after that, in and out of over 50 treatment centers, just hitting different types of bottoms, so it's something that was already in me. And I never have blamed her for that. It was my own mindset, my own, inquisitive nature that made me even hang out with a 45-year-old teacher who was creepy and trying to hook up with her students. You know what I mean? That's more or less it.
What was going on in your life though for that to kind of take place? I mean, obviously you're very, you're very impressionable and vulnerable at 15 years old. But I mean, how was your life in general? Were you going through your own trials, your own tribulations, your own anxiety, depression, insecurities? Was there some profound things that were going on? Because at 15, we're pretty, again, as obviously we're very, very young and not developed at all, but also, we're kind of at an age where I think we know what's right and wrong, right? So, where were you at prior to that happening?
I think I was just, I was one of the more adventurous people, just from childhood. I think I just have it in my nature. I recently heard this, fact on some type of, I don't know if it was a TikTok or something incredible like that, but it was that addicts, people who have the addictive nature and gene, have less dopamine and serotonin output in their brain to begin with. Right. So we need more in life. We are always grabbing at life more than others. And that gave me a sense of calm to hear that little fun fact, because I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because I'm always out looking for more. I need more, and then some more.
Right.
And regardless of the teacher or the environment I grew up in or the traumas as a child or anything like that, I think I just have a natural baseline where I'm going to need more unless I have some type of spiritual solution.
So I want to know, how did you guys get away with this for so long? Your parents, a year? I got caught within the first 2 weeks.
I don't know. That's
because were you just not going to school for a year? Would you go to your other classes and then ditch out when you had her class? How was that working?
Yeah, I think it was probably... Well, maybe it was a little less than a year, but some of it stretched through the summer months. You know what I mean? So that was a non-issue. In the very beginning, we could keep it together and we would just skip a little bit, or when we had free classes or lunch period or something like that, we'd go over. But by the end, we just didn't really go
So, but in the beginning, it wasn't an all day thing. It progressed over the course of time, and that was in the latter months of it taking place. But so it was just kind of an hour here, hour there, and then it, got more and more. Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. And what was where were your parents during this whole process? Just not,
I don't know.
What did they do when they found out?
They were pretty upset.
Yeah.
I think they were pretty upset. I think my dad, got a little reckless. He started making threats at all type of people, and then realized he's got kind of too much to lose to be that reckless.
Yeah.
And my parents had me very young. Right. And they had my sister 11 years later. And so they had a brand new kid, that they were trying to raise. And they were just we really can't have this. They really couldn't give me attention because they were look, we had you young. We made all the mistakes. You're kind of on your own for this. We have to do right with the next one, So I think, I got kicked out pretty much shortly after that. When it all got discovered, they sent me to treatment, I think once, and I didn't stay sober, and they're you got to go. So I moved out very young.
Did you move out before 18?
Oh yeah.
And let's talk about that a little bit. So how did that take place as you as a minor?
Well, they kicked me out when I was, I think, 15 at one point, and the police brought me back and said that they had to take care of me until I either got emancipated at 16 or, until I was 18. But yeah, I don't really know. I think, yeah, I don't know. That was a long time ago. That was such a long time ago. And I don't really remember how it happened. I remember them, they dropped me off at a shelter once or twice, or they would tell me that I would have to be sober or leave. And so I would leave, those kind of situations. But
was there any events that led up to this that were triggering? I mean, I totally understand and can relate to the kid. I mean, Alex, I think you understand me as a kid. I mean, I was jumping as high as I could off the trampoline into the pool. Just things that, even the teenagers weren't doing. I could totally see the thrill seeking and totally understand that. But was there an event or something that happened from that bike incident to the point of first use though that triggered that? I mean, is there family history with addiction?
I think my family would probably say no, but I would say yes. I think we have a lot of people who are alcoholic in my family, just
functioning.
Drink. Yeah, not functioning. No,
okay.
Definitely not. But they're drinking, and drinking is that's a normal thing to do. It's just heroin's not a normal thing to do. But yeah, I think it's probably more culturally accepted in my family to be an alcoholic than it is to be a drug addict.
Yeah, I think for society it is. I mean, that's just how it's portrayed, as alcohol is not really that bad on the outside, you know what I mean? But internally it does so much damage and destruction. It's, very apparent.
Yeah.
One question that I have, hearing your story, with the teacher and your parents kicking you out and stuff like that, looking through a mental health lens, I hear that you didn't exactly have good role models or good authoritative models to follow direction from. Could you say that maybe that played into why treatment was difficult, in that you had to go to so many different places because you never had an authoritative figure that you could follow where you had positive results? So you kind of took this, well, I'll figure it out. I've got myself this far. And well, that got you to, over 50 treatment facilities.
Yeah. So it's actually, I recently went to a wellness retreat, right? A few years ago. And they do kind of a meditation to this regression. And it could be as simple as this, or there could be more. But I did, meditation, and they bring you back into the past, and they find out your point of suffering, right? So I've had night terrors since I was a kid. And when I was a little kid, I used to wake up screaming and crying, trying to go to my parents' room. Wow. And at a certain point, they would shut the door and have me just stay outside on the floor, and I would curl up on the floor and sleep right there. And I remember one day, when I did the meditation, this is what came up. I remember one day when I was crying outside their door, I all of a sudden realized no one's coming to save me. And I just stopped crying. I looked around, and then I just really never asked for help again. And it was it's, you know what I mean? But I just I made a decision to be self-sufficient in that moment when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. I was oh, okay. This is I'll do this myself. And then I did have that mentality for a very long time.
Sounds almost like survival as a necessity because of abandonment, or the feeling of abandonment, or that lonesome that nobody's going to come and help. So yeah, you had to do what you had to do.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense. And just kind of thinking about my life after that whole retreat, I was that actually makes a lot of sense. Even just in stressful work situations, or, friend situations, or when something goes wrong, I just instinctively go into this thing, I'm going to handle this for myself, but also for everyone else. You know what I mean? And it kind of stuck, but, and I don't think it's the worst thing. I don't look at it my whole life was ruined. It's not. I have a great life. I'm happy that I had all the experiences I did, because they formed who I am today.
No, it is. But I also think it's and look, obviously where you're at is incredible. But I identifying that and looking back, I mean, that is super traumatic. I mean, for a 3 or 4 year old, I mean, that's how old my daughter is right now. And again, we're not a good example because we probably overly coddle. Oh, come here, baby. Like, we'll put her right in the middle of the bed and all that stuff, as opposed to trying to walk through that. But I'm sure your parents did the best that they could, but it goes back. We've said this 1,000 times on the show. Your body keeps a score, right? There's that whole book on trauma and how, I mean, that could definitely be a life altering event for sure. Especially if you remember it just a couple years ago, all the way back to that time frame that had a significant impact on your life. But again, is when you were really needing help at that age and you are very innocent. And you should have had that support, like 100%. And so, again, as I'm not a therapist, but it is based on all the work and stuff that I've done on myself and what I hear, that's something to be able to point out, because I believe it had an impact for sure. Whether you see that or not, I mean, just the work that we do today, you know what I mean? It's like when you get back to those key, and it takes people years, and sometimes people never figure out those incidences or those moments that really create and craft those types of things. So, wow. Well, look, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today, but I'm grateful that we have you for another episode, because I still want to get into everything that happened after the incident in high school and with the teacher and with your friends. And, I want to get more into, your experiences and the treatments that you went to and why you had to go through so many to get to where you're at today. So thank you so much for this, and we'll be back again next week.
All right. Thank you, guys.